the biggest and baddest rematches they love to promote. Stipe Miocic, 2-time world heavyweight champion, rematch in Francis Ngannou, and the biggest heavyweight rematch as the UFC is promoting of UFC history. Me personally, I'm going to root for Francis. I want Francis to win. I think Francis has a better chance at winning. I just think Stipe is going to win a decision again because I just think his wrestling is just too much for Francis. Even though he got Kamaru Usman in his corner, I think Stipe is just going to out wrestle him, grab a decision, and move on to lose to John Jones. What do you guys think?
So I see it going one of two ways, right? I see it, if Francis wins, he gets him out by the first or second. Some type of crazy punch puts him out cold. I think if Stipe wins, he just brings him into deep waters, fourth, fifth. I think he goes to a decision with a possible fourth, attempt at a finish of some type. And I think the more likely to happen is Stipe with the decision overall. I think he just has too much skills. Like, he's no slouch. While Francis might be, one of the most dangerous heavyweights we've ever seen, Stipe is very skilled and has beat him before. If he can just improve on what he did, then he'll get the win.
Yeah. I agree there where I think Stipe will get the win out of this. I will be rooting for Francis, similar to Lau. That's from like just a fan perspective, but from like just being realistic, I do feel as though Stipe is going to win this fight. Similar to, I'm not sure if you guys remember, but I think it was when after Francis lost the first time, I think he went on to fight Derek Lewis next, I believe, right?
Correct.
And in that fight, you could see where he was like, he was a shell of himself, where he was like scared. He was scared to do anything because he had gotten beat over the course of multiple rounds because just from being out wrestled. So I'm curious to see how that mentality has changed now that he's back in the ring with the same person that gave him put him in that mental space. But it's, when it comes to Stipe, at the end of the day, Francis has a puncher's chance, but even outside of that puncher's chance, Stipe is probably going to grapple him. Stipe has already proved before that he can take a punch from Francis. Like, that's without question. So if Francis has a shot in the first round, but after that, if he doesn't get him out of there, if he doesn't get Stipe out in the first round, I got to go with Stipe.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm rooting for Francis. There was another title fight, Ortega and Volkanovski, but literally like yesterday, postponed. Volkanovski tested positive. So the card is still not a bad card. It should be still a fun night of fights leading up to the title match in the main event. But having that featherweight title fight, just if it was going to happen, who were you guys picking? I was going to actually, believe it or not, I was picking Ortega. I was going to pick Ortega to do it. I think Ortega had enough to take the bet away for Volkanovski in a solid decision. Volkanovski's not a slouch or whatever, but he's shown that, hey, if he doesn't mix in his wrestling, he can get beat. And Ortega's not bad on the ground himself.
Well, I think Brian Ortega would have been enough to take him, only because I think what we can clearly say at this point in time about Volkanovski in the Max Holloway fights, at least, and of course it's MMA math, but the reason why he beat Max Holloway was because he had a good game plan. But Max Holloway is still no slouch, but he was just able to out game plan him. Now, I'm not sure if he would have been able to out game plan Brian Ortega. His style's a little bit more like unpredictable, I would say, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And he'll be there with you on the ground and, possibly get you on your feet. So I think it would be a little bit harder for him to win that fight, which would lead to Brian Ortega taking the win.
Similar to what you said, like I think Volkanovski, if he puts a good plan together, he can beat Brian Ortega. But granted, now it's all hypotheticals because he's out of the fight.
Right.
Yeah.
But like, I would be rooting for Brian Ortega as well because he's proven himself before, and I think it's nonetheless of just sharpening that skill set and creating a plan for the champion. Like, if you watch him fight Max, he's like, okay, he's been in the ring with Max before as well. So it's like he knows what to expect from his fight from Max, as well as seeing, okay, this fighter is a more improved fighter. Max is more improved than when he fought Brian Ortega back then, but it's like, okay, I have the groundwork. I have a blueprint of how Max is, and depending on how I think I could beat Max, depends on how my performance against Max today is probably how he would probably compare that to how his performance would be against how Volkanovski's performance was against Max. And that's all like hypotheticals and stuff like that nonetheless. But I don't know. I would have had Brian Ortega. Hopefully they can reschedule this sooner than possible because he tested positive for COVID, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so hopefully they can get this on the next card, possibly within the next month, because I know these type of training camps, he's trained super hard for this to get to this point. So
yeah, and that quarantine shit from Australia to America is no joke. You know, apparently you gotta, when you leave Australia, you got to quarantine in America for like 2 weeks, do all the testing. After the fight, you got to be there for 2 weeks, then quarantine, and go back to Australia and quarantine for another 2 weeks. Like it sucks. So I don't know if the UFC is gonna like, hey, just stay in America. We'll make it worth your while. We'll get you guys back together soon. Because if they send his ass home, we won't be seeing this motherfucker fight till like the fall because the quarantine procedures, you know, it's a long, because I know for me, if I'm going back home, I'm like, bro, I got to quarantine for a month before going back home. You know, let's just set this fight on a later date because I'm not going to turn around a month later and redo this whole quarantine shit. It's very taxing, you know. It stops you from doing a lot of things because you got to be confined in a space and you can't go out and train how you need to train for a championship fight, you know. So I think
exactly
that's, you know, unfortunate for Volkanovski. Hopefully, you know, he's good and they put this fight back together because it's a good fight for the division. But another good fight for the division